Welcome to the Stetzer ChurchLeaders Podcast, where we're helping Christian leaders navigate and lead through the cultural issues of our day. My name's Daniel Yang, the director of the Church Multiplication Institute, and this week we're talking again with Phil Vischer. Phil's an animator, writer, voice actor, and director known for co-creating VeggieTales, voicing dozens of its characters, including Bob the Tomato. In 2012, Phil and Sky Jitani launched the Holy Post podcast, which has since then expanded to a diverse media resource, helping believers live faithfully in an increasingly post-Christian culture. We concluded last week's episode with Ed asking Phil if he identifies as an evangelical, and we're picking up that conversation with Phil's response.
So then you're sort of, it's not disaffected evangelicals, but you talk about that young evangelical, watch VeggieTales on the back door of the church. Yeah, trying to stay. So I say that you still have, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you an evangelical? Do you use that word to describe yourself?
No,
where are you?
I'm an evangelical because that's right. How Americans pronounce it.
So do you hold to those beliefs and practices?
Yes.
Okay.
You can point me to the official document of what those beliefs and practices are.
The Bebington Quadrilateral.
I hold to the Bebingtons. I desperately want to start a coffee shop called Bebington's Quadrilateral, where you can, and it's within walking distance.
And just so everybody knows, that means there are four markers of being an evangelical. Yes. And it has to do with centrality of the cross, Christocentrism, biblicism. Anyway, there are four things.
Yes.
My new book, I actually critique it and talk about there being five things, but that's another story. And
several people have added one or two extra things to the quadrilateral.
Yeah, there's what's his name here? Timothy Larson has the Larson I don't think he says pentagram. That sounds.
I hope not. Yeah, that's not going anywhere.
But he got
don't call it the Enneagram either.
Exactly. I know that. I found out that's like, because I had your wife on the show. She's and we talked about the Enneagram. I think it was. I'm not sure if it was my radio show or this podcast. And then no one was mad about it, but then later people got mad about it.
Now people are mad about it retroactively because
it's hard to keep up.
It became the Satanic Panic of the Week. Do you subscribe to the Satanic Panic of the Week Club? They send you a new one every week. Like, you need to be mad about yoga pants this week.
I do. I do not comment on yoga pants.
And by the way, I was surprised that you were brave enough to wear them when we had dinner in downtown Wheaton. But that's a...
Wow, there's a mental image. Someone's going to create that on, like, what's that Mid-Journey? What's that AI thing? Someone's going to create that on there as well.
Ed Stetzer, downtown Wheaton, yoga pants.
I am never going to dinner with you again. Okay, so then, I mean, are you, because you talked about...
Yes, I'm evangelical.
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
Because some people say, if you criticize evangelical, you're not evangelical, but you are pretty much a critic, but also who lives in Wheaton is Mark Knoll, and he teaches Sunday school. And Mark, he criticized evangelicalism, but from the perspective, he calls himself a wounded lover.
Yes.
So what are you trying to accomplish with these kind of critiques?
I am intrigued by the influence by the interplay over the last 100 years of what I would describe as Northern evangelicalism and Southern fundamentalism.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by, the Carl Henry on one end, Bob Jones Sr. on the other end, kind of continuum, and even more that the tug of war, and where, now a Jerry Falwell, where does he fall on that continuum, and who's wrestling the name evangelical closer to their side. Yeah. I think that's a very interesting story over the last 60 years, is who owns the name evangelical? What does it mean? Does it mean you like Billy Graham, or can you hate Billy Graham and still call yourself an evangelical?
No, you can't.
So that's what I'm interested in. And I do believe more in the Northern evangelical tradition, that also, Billy Graham and John Stott and the Lausanne movement, which isn't just a Northern evangelical tradition, but it's kind of a global evangelical tradition. Mm-hmm. And I'm very concerned, and this is why 2016 through since 2016 have been so concerning for us, is feeling that some of the worst aspects of Southern fundamentalism are winning the day. And creating a new global impression of historic evangelicalism. So I'm really interested in how the Civil War through Jim Crow affected the Southern Church, and then how the Southern Church is affecting global evangelicalism.
Well, and I think the Southern Church certainly is the center. I mean, when you look numerically,
Mhm.
it certainly is the center. You know, even using the word evangelical, Floyd Valentine, who was a very famous Southern Baptist ethicist, called evangelical a Yankee word, and that's not something that they sort of held on to. I'm
Yeah.
of the view, and I'm actually writing my chapter on this, that people are right now wrestling, everyone's grabbing for the wheel of what evangelicalism is and will
Yes.
be. I am, and you are as
Yeah,
well.
that's
We're
why
all making our
that's why
case.
you and I have to get it. We have to get the wheel,
And
Jesus.
I don't know that I want the wheel for the power, but I do think that, you know, I kind of use the
Well,
metaphor.
I'd like it to influence the wheel for avoiding pedestrians.
Okay,
Because
okay,
we're
that's
running-
taking the
we're-
metaphor a little more distant, but I do think that we're in a time of contested evangelical identity. I think that's
Absolutely.
what I'm trying to get to. And
Absolutely.
in
And
the
it's
past,
becoming cultural and political and not a theological conviction. So when you read
100%.
Stephen Wolf's book on Christian nationalism, or the piece he wrote this week in the American Reformer, where he said, in the name of Christian hospitality, we need to kick out all illegal immigrants because they're damaging the cohesion of our communities.
my guess is he didn't say it exactly like that, but
He said
one of the
deport.
concerns,
He said
one of the concerns I have is evangelicals have a high xenophobia on some of these issues. So we're all sort of wrestling for, and the metaphor I actually build on is that Billy Graham kind of shaped it, and along with people like Harold Lockingham and Carl Henry and others, and shaped what was institutional evangelicalism, like a potter shapes this, and they actually call it throwing clay. There are parts that they threw out and parts that they threw in. That's what that's called. What do you think needs to be thrown out for a healthy, vibrant future evangelicalism? And what do you think needs to be thrown in for a healthy, vibrant evangelicalism?
Oh man, I don't.
Is that all right? Can I ask that? And it's not a question
you can ask that. That might be above my pay grade.
Well, you sort of already talked some about your concern. About issues of immigrants.
Someone just tweeted a really nice summary based on one of Stott's books of the difference between evangelicalism and fundamentalism, according to John Stott. And it was.
And if John Stott said it, it's when it comes to the identity of evangelicalism, we got to listen.
Yeah, I think that's worth listening to.
Yeah.
And I really resonated with it, you know, and there's because I had long ago on the podcast tried to come up with 7 distinctives between evangelicalism and fundamentalism, you know, and one of the big ones was just pugilism, just the love of fighting. You know, and because you see it in the early 20th century, kind of in the break between William Bell Riley and, you know, and other dispensationalists that didn't want to be all about culture wars. So William Bell Riley, you know, took the World Christian Fundamentalist Association in a culture war direction, where it was all about rooting out Bolshevism, liberalism, you know, and I forget what his other one was, liberal theology, communism.
Higher criticism was part of
his concern. Evolution.
Yeah, evolution. Yeah.
So there's a subset of conservative Christians, because my family tradition is on the fundamentalist side of the fundamentalist modernist
Simpson,
controversy.
you're coming out of CMA, sure.
Yeah. So my whole world is on the fundamentalist side of the fundamentalist modernist controversy. But then there's a split, you know, in the 40s with Ockenga and Henry and others between trying to recover a more wholesome evangelicalism from a more reactive, you know, culture warring separatist evangelicalism or fundamentalism. And I'm just like, there's something precious in there in the middle. And it's so easy to either give it all up and just say, I just do activism for the sake of activism. I do justice for the sake of justice, or to give it all up the other way and go all in, you know, and say, I'm just going to police yoga pants. That's my thing. And there's something beautiful in the middle of, okay, no, we're following Jesus. And Jesus didn't spend a whole lot of time policing women's garments, didn't spend a whole lot of time policing what music you were listening to. How do we follow Jesus and be constructive towards creation and, you know, and the neighborhoods that we're in? Not be reactive, not be separatist, but also not throw away the distinctives of the faith, you know, not throw away orthodoxy for the sake of relevance, but not add on to orthodoxy for the sake of my culture that I'm trying to preserve.
So I think, like, everything you just said, I think
That makes sense.
I think I might 100%
Of
agree
course.
with.
Ed,
but
Ed, you don't
yes.
have any argument with me, Ed.
Actually, I do, but
Ed?
because I would, we've talked about this over dinner. I think some clarity on some issues would serve you better than the constant
I hear you.
asking the follow-up question that without actually giving the answer.
I'm a host. I'm a host.
Okay,
I'm not a
I understand.
theologian.
You're not a host on this, though. You're not a host on this. So here's what I think. Partly, you're trying to advocate for something, but whereas people who are opposed to you are very clear what they want. They want people like you out of evangelicalism.
Yes.
But you seem to be less clear on, and so why not say this is what should go in, this is what should go out? Or is that just a question that you haven't thought about before?
I think that's a boundary policing that is part of what I don't want to engage in.
But you are literally saying evangelicalism should not be neo-fundamentalism. Is not that boundary policing?
A little bit. But it's not
a little bit. It's completely boundary policing. You're basically saying, I wish this was not who we were, which means I want you to stop or go away.
Okay.
Two options, right? Stop being that way or go away and don't.
No. What I would say is, hey, everybody, let's define. Hey, everybody.
How about you say, hey, everybody? Okay.
Hey, everybody.
That's the evangelical industrial complex.
Let's define this as not classic evangelicalism.
Right.
Let's say racism is not part of classic evangelicalism. Let's say, there's a whole host of things. This is not part of classic evangelicalism.
Right.
Now, I'm not going to say, hey, women in the pastorate, is it or isn't part of classic evangelicalism? There have always been a multiplicity of points of view. Sure. If you're, Assembly of God, you've always had women in the pulpit. So there's
your historic denomination, Christian Missionary Alliance, literally just changed their mind to a kind of a, it's like not quite egalitarian, but sort of a
it's not
in-between sort of view.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, we're in the muddy middle now, but at least, whatever. I'm not trying. What I'm more likely to do is say, hey, I want to elevate a voice that has some really clear thinking about this issue. I'm not convinced my thinking is always really clear.
Okay. I don't listen to a lot. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but I do listen to yours. But sometimes when I listen to your podcast, I'm like, I want you to say, what's your solution? I hear the problem. I share concerns about the problem. What's the solution? And that's probably what I'm a little bit pressing here on is, what do you want? I know you want a children's program, but what do you want?
That's very vague. That's very vague.
For more than that.
I just want free ice cream. I want one day a year for there to be free ice cream.
Free ice cream when it snows?
I would like to hold to the fundamentals while agreeing that we all just can't make everything that we love a fundamental.
Right. We can't elevate everything. If if everything is an essential, then that's literally the definition of parts of fundamentalism.
Yes.
Yet I sometimes want you to be clearer on what is a fundamental. What has to be there? Is it the 5 fundamentals of the faith that go back to the early part of the last century?
It's easy. The Apostles' Creed. I don't think there's anything in the Nicene Creed that I wouldn't say is part of the fundamentals of evangelical orthodoxy, although I haven't read John's. What
you're saying? There's something in the Nicene Creed
I'm saying I'm not aware of anything that wouldn't be.
I got you.
Of evangelical orthodoxy. Right. So I think you go back to the historic creeds and you're good there. But then we all want to know, but what about civil unions between same-sex couples? What about yoga pants on girls over the age of 5?
Wow, that's quite a leap from civil unions to yoga pants. But this is what goes on in your mind.
Those I would say those are the parts. There's things that are more even would be more controversial than civil unions.
Yeah, sure.
Full-on gay marriage blessed by the church would certainly be more controversial and harder to justify in Orthodox evangelicalism than allowing civil unions in a multicultural society.
So you're sort of asking questions around the edges.
Yes.
About an example of civil unions. You've said before that you hold Orthodox views of marriage. So
yes,
but you're asking questions around here. So just
like David French saying at one point he was opposed to gay marriage, but now that it's the law of the land, he is opposed to pulling it away from people who have shaped their lives relying on that law. And that's his point of view as a Christian who's a civil libertarian. And I would tend to agree with that. Is it loving our neighbors to take things away from them because we've gained more political power and we didn't think the thing should have been given in the first place? And that's, it's like abortion, gay marriage, all of the, now transgender.
Let's just get all the issues out there. Just get them all right now.
Yeah. I don't have clear answers on any of those.
Okay. And but you seem to say that you have some clear answers, but it's sort of the edges where you don't. And let me just say too, I didn't agree with David French's column. I thought it was unhelpful and I probably shared a lot of people's criticism of it.
Okay.
But and that's okay. So what if someone like me says, that's not the approach that I would take? But you're kind of on the edges of these issues, sort of poking and prodding. That's part of your personality. What you're trying to accomplish? To help us think more? To change our minds?
Honestly?
What do you? Please. Honestly, yes. Up to now, you've not been honest, but from now on, let's be honest.
Quite often, I'm trying to help me think more.
Fascinating. Okay.
I haven't thought about all these issues. So if I read a piece by David Gushee or a piece by Michael Gerson or a piece by David French or a piece by Denny Burke or a piece by, there's all these by Al Mohler.
And hopefully some women you read as well.
No, there are things that I have to take a firm stand on and putting myself under the written authority of a woman.
Oh my. Wow. We're going to have to edit this part out, but there are some wonderful women leader. But the point is, I think you were illustrating the diversity of people that you read. And I like that illustration that's there. So one of the things I found interesting about, I always want to try to explain you to people sometimes, is when we were having some of this conversation over dinner, and you really do process some of these things in public.
I do.
Which I want you to know is not always the best thing to do in 2023, but it's your call to do.
But you know what it reflects? Do you know what it reflects, Ed Stetzer? Edward William Stetzer.
William's my brother's name. My middle name's John, but okay.
Edward, Jonathan, after Edwards, I assume. Edwards,
Jonathan,
Edwards,
just
Stetzer.
Edward, John Stetzer.
I am trying to portray epistemic humility.
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't have all the answers.
Can I want you to say more about that. But we have experience in the last 30 years of evangelicalism that those who talk about holding epistemic humility are often on their way out and would not like to articulate they're on their way out because they still have a voice within evangelicalism until they're out. And then it makes it real hard for the rest of us to say, they were making some good points. We were listening, but now they moved away from orthodoxy. So there is some history that's there.
Sure. That sounds like a slippery slope argument, Ed Stetzer.
I've heard of slippery slopes, and sometimes slopes are slippery. So epistemic humility to help us do what?
Well, it's kind of like what I actually like that Rick Warren said on Russell Moore's podcast, is that a conservative Baptist believes in the authority of Scripture. A fundamentalist Baptist believes in the authority and inerrancy of my interpretation. I don't know how to interpret all of the Bible. I am not. I'm not here to say this is the right way to read Hebrews, because that's not me. That's not even a goal for me to be able to tell you the right way to read Hebrews or the right way to read, 1 Timothy 2 or the right way to read all these controversial chapters. I'm not even here to tell you the right way to read Genesis 1. And I actually have done a lot of study on that one. So what I try to do with kids is, here are the two most common ways people read Genesis 1. Which one is right? We don't know for sure. Does the Bible tell us exactly how old the earth is? It doesn't seem to. Some people say yes, it could be this, it could. So I'm probably too squishy for, people when they go to the right of the middle of evangelicalism because certainty is another one of the marks of fundamentalism.
Sure. And are there some things that you are sure that are not squishy that you would say, here I stand on these issues?
Yeah, the Apostles' Creed.
Apostles' Creed, okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Good place to be. Okay.
I'm sure that is the foundation, but I'll also say I'm sure that is the foundation of not necessarily the Bible, because it was a group of people trying to distill what they believed the Bible said. So then that's what the creeds are. The Bible isn't a creed. The Bible is a body of knowledge that people have tried to distill creeds out of. And then if you're in that tradition, you say, yeah, that's my creed. And I'm absolutely on board with the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed and general, what I would describe when people ask, what's in the Bible? What's the theology of what's in the Bible? I would say centrist evangelical.
Centrist evangelical. That's a term you would use to kind of describe yourself. And I think Wheaton College often uses that term, centrist.
Now, having said that, I'm not sure if, now that I know how far out there evangelicalism goes, on the conservative side, where women now can't run parachurch ministries, where,
referencing that John Piper just answered a question and said that women shouldn't run parachurch ministries.
Or
you got to give context. You can't just casually mention these things.
What? I'm just saying that's how far it goes out there. Or that, the Southern Baptist pastor bragging on Twitter that in his church, we don't even let women read the announcements. Mm-hmm. That's how seriously we take the Bible. So
I think part of the challenge, though, is to remember just how, like, if people can't see or are listening by a podcast, but if I hold my hand out and this is evangelicalism, the centrist evangelicalism is not in the center of all of evangelicalism.
This is
true.
It's
way to the, we use left and right, but it's way to the left side where the center is.
Yeah.
Because conservative evangelicalism is huge.
And it just goes on and on and on. It goes on all the way to, Jesus wore pants because he would never wear a dress. And
of course, fundamentalists don't consider themselves part of evangelicalism, but we actually do consider fundamentalists part of evangelicalism because it's part of how we count them being born again and that kind of stuff.
Well, or evangelicalism is a part of fundamentalism historically. So,
Or comes, neo-evangel comes out of some of those things. And again, I could talk about 5 hours on this, but
are we even making sense anymore, Ed? Is anyone still listening?
We're so inside my team who's listening is very much enjoying this, but here's my question for you.
Okay. This is your last chance to ask me that hard-hitting question that I promise I'll answer.
If we listen to you, what's evangelicalism going to look like?
Oh, that's a good one. John Stott on a bicycle. In other words,
someone's going to make a mid-journey. Someone's going to use AI and create John Stott on a bicycle, and we'll make that the image for this episode.
The classic strains of British Northern America, Northern evangelicalism, but not taking itself seriously. Quite so seriously. Hence the bicycle.
So that's going to be conversionist, seeing men and women trust and follow Jesus as Lord and Savior. Stott was very passionate about that. That's going to be biblical teaching on issues of gender and sexuality. Scott was very clear on that. That's going to mean, social concern. Stott writes about this on more than one occasion about caring for the least of these, the poor, those without. So a Stottian evangelicalism would be something that you would say that's a win.
Absolutely. With
a few exceptions, I could get on board with that.
Yeah, and I'm not a Stott scholar. So I've read summaries, and that's why I'm often reticent to make bold declarative statements, because Enneagram, if it's not satanic, then I can use it. So I'm right now assuming it's not satanic. I'm a 5. 5s love to learn. They love to acquire knowledge, but the biggest fear of a 5 is revealing himself to be ignorant because he hasn't learned enough and he spoke.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And I wish people would, again, partly people will talk to me and they're mad about you saying something or doing something. And I'm like, I don't always agree with you. Obviously, we've had some pretty robust discussions, private discussions, and now we're having a good robust one here. But I think understanding your framing as an Enneagram 5, I have learned things from you. You have helped me grasp things better. And at the same time, you drive me crazy with your lack of clarity. I just want clarity as kindness. Just be clear on these issues and then say, I think this, but here's where I have questions. But you don't. You say you focus on the questions because in some ways you're still trying to learn.
Yeah, and I definitely, I intentionally avoid highly declarative statements on Twitter. On Twitter, if people are trying to pin you down and demanding you make a highly declarative statement.
You like literally, because I watch you sometimes and I text you sometimes.
Insane.
I text you and say, stop this, because I know what you believe on. We've had conversations about this. and yet you won't just say it. So why will you not just say it?
Well, a couple of reasons. Number one, someone is using it as a litmus test for in-group, out-group politics.
There are theological litmus tests, but anyway.
And I resent that.
You do?
Yeah, I resent that. Especially when in a performative setting. So I've got you cornered on Twitter. It's like someone coming to your door, knocking on the door, demanding you come out on your front porch and yell loudly your position on Proposition 28 that's coming before the, the Planning Commission. It's like, I resent you demanding that I do that for your purposes. So I'm just going to have a little fun with you, and I'm going to see if I can get you chasing your tail in a circle.
I just want to say clarity is kindness, brother. Be clear what you believe. We don't have to agree. But
there are also subjects where, if in a public context you say something pithy, and it's a subject that is deeply personal to people, particularly people that are in an outcast community. I'd rather not say anything than say something that could wound someone where I'll never know it and never have a chance to explain what I meant. So I resist publicly declarative statements that are demanded, and will often have fun with the demander.
Yes, it's fun for you. When Lisa and I are texting, it's not as fun for us.
Oh, Ed, you're not in it.
Make him stop.
You're not in it. It doesn't affect you.
Oh, I don't jump into those kind of Twitter things. Twitter is not a great place for thoughtful conversation.
And I'm trying to do less of that, because
I noticed. It's
not great for my
question. I think saying last question, but pastors and church leaders who listen to your podcast, and there's a lot of them. They do. Many have said is that they've kept them tethered to their faith, that somebody is asking these questions. There is a safe place to have some of these conversations. For others, they probably don't like necessarily some of the ways those conversations flow. People have different opinions. For pastors and church leaders, they have a lot of people in their church who maybe are like that kid who listened to Veggie Tales. It's at the back door trying to figure it out. You can have listened to the podcast, but what advice, this is really the last question. We went much longer than we should have, and I thank you for your graciousness, but what advice would you give to that pastor to help minister to that person with questions?
Be willing to say, I'm not sure. Sure. Let's study that issue together. It's feeling the need to always have the answer to everything, to kind of to justify the position that you've been put in. It was so helpful. And I mentioned this somewhere. I remember going to my mother when I was in high school, and I was in a unit on evolution, and I just went to my mother, who grew up when she was 8 years old. She was sitting on a couch in her grandfather's living room with Bob Jones Jr. on one side of her on the couch and Bob Jones Sr. on the other side of her in the couch. Wow. And she was in between the two of them. So that's her upbringing. And I went to her and said, do we believe in evolution? And there was a long pause, and she looked at me and she said, I don't really know. And what that did for me was it gave me permission to study the issue and draw my own conclusion. I am going to go dive in and study this issue. And then as opposed to handing your kid, a whole list, the 40-page voter's guide, this is who you're going to vote for in every race. Hey, let's talk about issues. And let's look for how biblical truth, how the Great Commandment, how the Sermon on the Mount applies to these issues. And we may come to different conclusions then. We might decide to have different border policy. We might decide to have different attitudes towards women or towards the LGBTQ community. We might decide to have different, but we're both starting with the Sermon on the Mount. We're both starting with the Great Commandment. We're both starting with a commitment to following Jesus. And then we hold each other with enough love to say, all right, you've decided that you're inviting these people into this situation. I disagree with you, but that's okay, because I know that you're also following Jesus and trying to do, your best. So I'm really just going for the humility to say, I have full confidence in Scripture and much lower confidence in my inerrancy as an interpreter thereof.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil Vischer, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
You're welcome, Ed.
You've been hearing from Phil Vischer. You can learn more about him at Evangelicalism.com. Be sure to check out his podcast, The Holy Post, at holypost.com. And thanks again for listening to the Stetzer Church Leaders Podcast. You can find more interviews as well as other great content for ministry leaders at ChurchLeaders.com/podcast. And again, if you found our conversation today helpful, we'd love for you to take a few moments to leave us a review. That'll help other ministry leaders find us and benefit from our content. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.